Also, we talked about somehow heavy concepts, but there is an easy way to understand the economy and see how the economy and the economic system will affect the business environment. Let's look at ourselves as individuals. So each one of us have individual productivity, and through this individual productivity we generate X amount of dollars as an income, and this is a direct result of the economic activity that we engage in. We do some work and we earn specific revenue, and we have costs, and we have a very, very important player here, the chartered banks or the central banks. Chartered banks are financial institutions regulated under the Canada Bank Act, and their primary responsibility is to bring together borrowers and lenders by accepting deposits and lending out money, all in a manner that safeguards the interest of their consumers or customers. And as individuals, when we were thinking of our own productivity, we also need to borrow money and to invest, and this investment is by lending our money. So the chartered banks are regulating this lending, borrowing activity in the economy. And there are 4 pillars of economic activity and growth. Again, thinking of us as individuals, our productivity results in some economic activity. So we have expenditures, the purchases we make to support our life. So the economic activity that are deemed to be of value in meeting our needs, improving the quality of our lives, like clothing, food, housing, transportation. These are examples of expenditures. Also, we have savings. Savings are the dollars that we set aside today to support the economic activity and wealth creation in the future. For example, when we invest our savings in registered retirement savings plan, or we purchase GIC, guaranteed investment certificates. So our savings are then lent to other individuals in the intent of stimulating their economic activities. Remember when we talked about the chartered banks? So the banks take our savings and lend it to other individuals, and this creates a cycle of economic activity. And also we have capital asset investments. These investments that we make today to further expand our capacity to conduct and expand our productivity and our economic capacity. For example, if your business requires a truck or a piece of equipment in the floor, or something new in the office, this would be considered an investment to expand the productivity and the economic activity of this business. Investments in real estate, for example, it's again, we are building future equity. We create some wealth appreciation. And also we have credit, the dollars we borrowed to support expenditure or investments or growth of the business. We might not have the means or the funds to buy this piece of equipment or this truck, or to perform some development in the facility. So we need to borrow money. So the economic activity is expenditure plus savings plus investment plus credit. And economies move through these 4 pillars. And these pillars are applicable to individuals, to businesses, and to governments. So as a business, you might have expenditures, you might have savings, you might have capital investments, and you might have credit and you borrow money. As a government, it's the same. As individual, it's the same. So the economic activities create an economic growth cycle. How do economies grow? It depends on the development stage of the economy. And this is interpreted as GDP. So the total value of a nation's economy is measured by gross domestic product. So the gross domestic product, or the GDP, is all the economic activities generated by individuals, businesses, and the government. and it's the total market value of the goods and services that nation produces domestically over a defined period of time, usually 1 year. And there are certain factors affecting the economic growth side. So the goods and services produced and purchased domestically for consumption, business investments within the economy, net value of products produced for export versus imported, government spending. And economists consider GDP is a very, very important factor to track. Is it going upward or downward? Because it indicates whether this economy is growing or contracting. So we will see here the Canada's GDP growth from the 1980s to 2020. We have certain economic drivers that affects the GDP, and it differs from country to country. For example, personal consumption, fixed asset investments, exports and domestic production, the development of the sector, the service sector, government spending. These are all factors impacting whether the economic growth is enhancing or retrenching. As I said, it differs from country to country. So let's take China to make some comparison. For China, the current key economic driver is government spending and the production of goods and services and the underlying capital investments associated with it. So the government is spending, investing in capital investments geared towards production of more goods and services. And this also is whether it's import or export focused. Are we producing these products and services to export to the other countries or not? So in China, a big portion of production activity is taking place for exporting these products and services to other countries. But recently, the domestic consumption is playing an increasing role in the consumption of these products and services. So now we have another factor. Consumer spending is playing a great role in China's GDP. On the other hand, the USA is one of the biggest purchaser of goods and services from the outside world, so they depend on imports. That's why we say the US is a consumer purchase-based economy. The consumer purchases are the engine that drives the current economy in the US, and this impacts the current global economy. The same case also for Canada. We are heavily driven by our consumer consumption. Consumer spending drives the economic expansion in Canada. But also in comparison with the US, we are not at par of the US. 70% of the Canada's GDP activity is driven by consumer spending and services. Other activities that influence the GDP movement, especially in Canada, is the natural resource sector like mining, forestry, potash, agriculture, and also the technology sector, the energy producing industries. So this diversification helps the Canadian economy to withstand when the conditions are not so favorable. There is downturn in one sector, there is upturn in other sectors. And the overall economy is stimulated by these different sectors. So the movement of economic activity within an economy could start like this. Growth in the economy via the GDP drivers like consumer spending in the US and Canada, and this results in an increase in corporate revenue and profits and government taxation or government tax revenue. As a result of this increase in profits and taxes, tax revenues, both business and government will possess increased capacity to invest in infrastructure, in new products and services, new businesses, and these investments expand the economic infrastructure to meet growing needs of the economy. And this will stimulate the economy activity. When we have increased business activities, we will need more employees. So we will have more employment opportunities. we will have lower unemployment rates, and we will have strong economic growth. When the economy needs more workers, or the employers are forced to pay higher wages to attract and retain more qualified and high quality employees. And also, again, this stimulates the economy by injecting more additional dollars. Now the workers and consumers have some bigger disposable income to spend, and then they contribute to the economic growth. How the movement in the economy is being managed. Let's have some example here. In the recent economic crisis, the government infused more capital, and the central banks infused and injected capital in the market, specifically to support the financial services and offer liquidity in the financial services sector. This is mainly was a mechanism to support the job creation, and this capital infusion is an abnormal response by the government, specifically in these recession periods. And this infusion of capital was debt-based, money borrowed, versus being revenue driven as a result of the economic factor. And government interactions like tariffs, taxes, trade regulations that add barriers to the trade growth within the country are always considered uncertainties. And in some cases, government interaction might affect or impact the economy negatively. Some interactions might lead to decreasing productivity. Some of the immigration policies do not allow for adequate replacement for the aging workforce, and we will talk about this later. The interest rates, for example, might affect the ability of businesses to borrow. Businesses also affect and impact the growth cycle in the economy, and impact how the economy is managed. When the private sector fails to invest in innovation and emerging opportunities, and this creates what's known as business inertia. And Canadian companies are guilty of being in this business inertia. And this means there is a lag of the business productivity compared to similar businesses across the world. And also the productivity of the Canadian worker lags about 30% of the US worker, especially in STEM sectors. These sector that depends on science, technology, mathematics, and engineering. So although we desire the growth and stimulation in the economy, this growth needs to be well managed. A well-managed growth will stimulate investment, yet it will still maintain a degree of control of inflation, for example, and other economic influencers that are not efficient. And here we have to differentiate between real growth and growth masked by inflation. So the government in Canada and the crown corporations and the provincial governments and the banks of Canada, they are all seeking to maintain equilibrium between growth and inflation, because when we have growth with inflation, it's not real growth. And also in Canada, we have economic clusters. For example, Halifax, Montreal, Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver. These are centers for economic growth. And this regional disparity will exist and will affect the real economic growth of Canada. For example, the provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, in the last few years, in these provinces, the drop in energy prices has resulted in these provinces experiencing regional recessions. Although we might not have a nationwide recession, but in certain clusters, in certain economic clusters, we have recession. And this pressure on global energy prices will still continue to impact Newfoundland and Labrador. And these clusters, the economy is not that diversified like other clusters compared to, for example, British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec. So to effectively manage the movement within a certain economy, we have to consider inflation, because inflation is like a pressure. It has a negative impact on the growth of the economic activity in Canada and in other countries. Inflation is like a thief. It robs the economy of true growth and impacts the confidence level of businesses and consumers. And for many years, the inflation rates were between 1.8 and 1.9%. However, in recent years, inflation rates are building, especially when it comes to food items that considered food staples like fruits, vegetables, meat, and of course, the drop of the Canadian dollar is not helping. But because we have expenses related to energy and natural resource base and commodities, we still are able to keep inflation at bay. So the lower prices of oil and metals such as copper and nickel and other mining-centric commodities will help to keep the overall inflation rate in check. And inflation also can affect specific business sectors. So in specific business sectors that has a tight labor market may see increasing pressure on wages, higher interest rates on debts. This could affect the prices in capital-intensive industries. In these industries, borrowing is a very important business model. Prices associated with the grains, coffee, and rice, because of the increasing demand for these goods globally, will lead to the rise, and it is expected to keep increasing and keep rising. Also in Canada, weather plays a significant role because we have droughts, we might have excessive rainfall, we might have diseases that wipe down crops and impact the harvest level. These situations might lead to some increases in prices. Also, as I mentioned, geographical economic clustering also may impact the management of the economy. So we have some regional economies develop into a healthier level than other geographic places. And this creates interdependency. And also sometimes we have some political unrest, like what happened when there was a growing opposition to oil and gas pipeline initiatives. And we had more tightening of carbon emission allowances. And where these industries are clustered, these geographic areas will experience increasing pressure. So what are the trends that are impacting the Canadian market and the Canadian economy as business people we have to consider? When we have a well-managed economic growth, we will have a stimulation for the investments, and with this stimulated investments, we still have some control on inflation. However, the market is very, very complex, continues to change. And we have different factors influencing the economy at any given time. So when we consider trends, we have to think of a specific time span. So we have consumer debt load, we have inflation, we have geographic clustering and economic imbalances, we have currency exchange rates, we have sustainability and green initiatives, and we have aging workforce, immigration, and multiculturalism. One of the most important trends is currency rates. So currency exchange rate usually benchmark the Canadian dollar against the US dollar. And this has sometimes positive and sometimes negative effects for the Canadian economy. On the positive side, the strengthening of the Canadian dollar compared to the US dollar assists in reducing the price of goods and services that we import into the country. It also enhances the tourism, because trips and vacations are becoming less expensive for Canadians. So there is more appreciation in the dollar, or upward appreciation in the dollar. It will also result in revenue received from exports such as energy, natural resources, and other commodities. On the negative side, a stronger Canadian dollar impacts the tourism inside Canada and manufacturing export sectors, as the price of the Canadian goods and services being exported to other countries rises, making these goods and services more expensive compared to their domestic products or other products that they will import from other countries. We need to maintain an exchange rate, a currency exchange rate that maximize the benefits and minimize the negative impacts. And it's in general, the Bank of Canada stated that it would be ideally to keep the Canadian dollar around 77 to 80 cents of the US dollars. This will help us to remain competitive in the global market and balance the geographic cluster tendency that we have here in Canada. Another trend that's impacting the Canadian economy is branch market. So the overall size of the Canadian economy is small when compared to other countries. And here we talk about purchasing power parity. And when we do this comparison, we consider fully developed economies such as the US, Germany, and developing economies such as China, India. And also, as we have a wealth of natural resources and energy and commodity-based goods and services, many global organizations have looked to actively purchase Canadian-owned companies. So this will help these companies to have a long-term access to our natural resources. And in recent years, so many foreign companies and foreign organizations have purchased the Canadian-owned companies, and they chose critical sectors, especially like natural resources and energy. This made so many government officials and economic analysts to be really concerned about the future of the Canadian economy. We have Brazilian and Switzerland-based companies buying Canadian-owned companies. We have examples of acquisitions of Vancouver-based companies, and the buyers come from different countries: China, Brazil, Switzerland. The Canadian government was engaged in a process to revamp Investment Canada Act and include a stronger national security test for assessing the impact of foreign ownership on the Canadian corporations and businesses, because these foreign ownerships actually it's like a mechanism for controlling the economic and cultural environment in Canada. And recently, so many businesses were target to acquisition, and the government has to step in and to stop this acquisition on the base of how this acquisition will harm the Canadian economy. When we talk about parity here, it means how equal or equivalent that we can compete on the global arena. Purchasing power parity is a measure that takes into consideration the relative cost of living and the inflation rate of a specific country compared to other countries, and adjusts the total value of economic activity of that country accordingly. And also, as I talked about acquisition, we have hostile takeovers. When there are attempts by a foreign country to take over another domestic country when the management or the board of directors are not willing or agreeing to the merger or the takeover or the acquisition. Another trend also that's worth noting is sustainability and green initiatives. Sustainability and green initiatives will keep having an increasing emphasis across so many business sectors and industries. Companies right now, especially in Canada, find it necessary for their growth and their survival is to achieve both market positioning advantage and cost advantage through the execution of green-based initiatives and strategies. So we have green products, environmentally friendly packaging, reducing carbon emissions, ethically sourced materials. Unfortunately, here in Canada, we haven't reached a degree of acceptable sustainability initiatives and green initiatives. Although there is tremendous effort to produce greener products and to incorporate more greener production operations, but yet we still have a long way to go. Very, very important trend is the aging workforce and the impact of immigration policies and multiculturalism on the economy. Canada, like other developed countries, especially when it comes to workforce, is aging. And this impacts the employment needs of certain sectors, especially the energy sector, for example. And this impacts also the immigration policies. And the immigration policies, or the immigration in general, opens the debate for the need for multiculturalism and inclusiveness. And there is the concept of intellectual capital. So the intellectual capital is the workforce, the educated workforce and sophisticated workforce a nation has. So here in Canada, we have shortage in intellectual capital, especially in fields like information technology, healthcare, education, skilled trades. The aging population with the low birth rates add more complications to the workforce situation in Canada. So Canada has a long-term strategy to replace retiring workers and to continue growing the economy through immigration. So we have a need for skilled, well-educated workers, and this need will continue to rise, resulting in the need to import skills. But relying on immigration has its complications as well. So Canada welcomes and respects newcomers despite their ethnic backgrounds, their tradition, but we face a problem of assimilation of these newcomers into the society in a manner that enables them to actively contribute to the social and cultural growth. Recognition of skills and degrees is a challenge here in Canada. But in most cases, newcomers are able to assimilate to the society, being recognized, and their foreign degrees to be recognized relatively easily with minimal barrier. We talked a lot about economy and economic movement and economic growth, but we need also to think as business people and link what the concepts that we learned to managing business and business operations. So to understand where the market is going, we need to ask some questions. For example, what are the general indicators existing in this current economy and that will affect the business? For example, recession. Recession is a very, very important economic concept that as business people we have to take care of. Recession time is a time that's characterized by market contraction, and it happens when the economy is experiencing 2 or more quarters of negative GDP. We need also, as business people, to think of the broad level changes happening within an economy. The political, the economic, the social, the technological, and the environmental and legal changes. These changes, especially happening in a specific sector or sectors in the economy, will affect or impact the organization future growth and the market position. What are the competitive actions within this market that affects my business, that might disturb or disrupt my business activities? So when we understand what's happening on the domestic level and on the global level, we will understand what influences our activities and our growth, as the possibility of our growth as a company or a business. So we need to understand how the employment or unemployment rate will impact my business, how the inflation rate will impact my business. Also the consumer confidence index, the stock market index, the currency exchange rates, the periodic or the monthly retail sales. So when we monitor these changes, we will be able to understand whether the economy is expanding or contracting? And in case if it is expanding, is it expanding rapidly or slowly? Do I have time to position my company? Do I have time to reinvent my business? What initiatives that I need to take to enhance the growth of my business or to increase the return on investment? To understand the impact of the economic environment on the business, we do a macro level analysis, and we usually use a very, very popular and familiar analysis, pestle analysis. So pestle analysis will help us to understand what are the broad level changes, political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. These changes that's happening and occurring within the sector I'm operating at, the sector I'm operating in, will impact my organization directly or indirectly, and will affect my business future growth and my position within this market. So when we think of the political changes, we might ask few questions like, what are the governmental policies that, or actions or initiatives that will impact my organization? Also, what are the political priorities of the government, whether it's federal or provincial? And how these changes will impact the business climate I'm operating in. When analyzing economic changes, we might ask some questions like, are there some economic trends or indicators that I need to consider because it will be favorable for my organization? Or are there any economic trends or indicators that will impact my organization negatively? Also, the volatility of the economy also will impact my position in the market. When it comes to social changes, we might ask what key influences are affecting the attitude of the consumer, have some impact on their behavior, the way they will see my company or my business. Is there certain trends within certain groups, whether it's my customer, my targeted customer segments or not, that will impact the future growth or the future demand on the products and services that I offer? What are the changes demographic or within the key populations that will impact the movement and the growth of the economy? We also need to consider technological changes. What emerging technologies that might have implications on my organization? What are the technologies that are redundant or will decline and no one will consider? Also, when we try to link our business to the economy, we need to understand the different models of competition within the market. So we have pure or perfect competition. In pure or perfect competition, this is usually a theoretical market. It's not a real one. In this theoretical model, all firms sell identical products. So they are all homogeneous. They are all substitute to each other. All firms are price takers. For example, they cannot influence the price of the product. Also, the market share has no influence on the price. And buyers have, or the purchasers have complete information. And we have a large number of suppliers or producers and the consumers, and they are all competing with one another. And we have the monopolistic competition model. In this model, companies or producers offer products or services that are somehow similar, but not identical, not perfect substitute. The barriers of entry, the barriers that will face any new firm or new companies to enter this market are relatively low, and the existence of one firm has no impact on a competition or a competing firm. Then we have monopoly, and free markets, they don't favor monopolies at all. Because monopoly will affect the price and the quality of the product. However, some sectors, they prefer monopolies, such as utilities. And sometimes the governments will encourage monopolies in certain sectors to have full control on price and quality of the product. And monopolies are created by different ways. The first way is barrier to entry. There are big barriers to enter a certain market. Or sometimes we have only one provider or one producer or one seller of this commodity. We also might have monopoly when the producer is able to produce a large quantity of the product and it's available everywhere. So in this way, they can have raw material discounts, low production cost, and this is what's called volume discount. We sometimes have pure monopoly, like Microsoft. Microsoft for many years was the only provider for operating system for personal computers. Yes, it's changed, the situation has changed recently, but still Microsoft controls more than 70% of the market. We might have monopolistic competition, like Visa and MasterCard. So all the credit cards in the market globally are controlled by these two companies. We might have what's called natural monopoly. For example, like pharmaceutical companies, they have patent on specific products or something, and having these patents gives them a natural advantage in this product. We have government sanctioned monopoly, such as Canada Post, Hydro, or Crown corporations like Canada Lands that works in public works and government sectors, services. We have Ridley Terminals that works in transport. And Crown corporations are called legal monopolies. So these are companies that operate as a monopoly under a governmental mandate. And legal monopolies like the alcohol and cannabis company here in Canada. We have also buyer's monopoly, when there is one buyer for a certain product or commodity or service. And also we have single payer. For example, here in Canada, we have the healthcare sector. So all the products that are geared towards the healthcare sector mostly are bought by a single buyer. The same thing in agriculture, the same thing in milk production. As business people, we need to sense the changes within the market, and we use Porter's model. So Porter's 5 forces model analyze the rivalry among existing competitors, analyze threats of new entrants, analyze threats of substitute products or services, bargaining power of suppliers, and bargaining power of buyers. This week, we learned about the economic system in Canada.